Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. And before we get into tonight's live stream, let me just say to all the Loving Life community in the Western Cape, I hope the floods have not impacted you personally. I've been seeing some fairly amazing footage of those floods. Now, tonight we're talking to top South African economist Dawie Roodt, and we're going to be talking about the current state of play in South Africa. And let me get Dawie on so that we can get the show on the road. Here we go. Hi, Dawie.
Good evening to you, Scott.
Lovely to see you again, buddy.
Nice seeing you as well.
Yeah. Oh, gee, I miss South Africa. Last time we spoke, I was right opposite you on the desk there.
Yeah, but it's a bit cold now, I can tell you that. But at least we've got a fireplace.
Yeah, and before we get started, look, happy anniversary and congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's 19,000 years now today.
Is that what it feels like? Well, I tell you what, your wife is gorgeous and your kids are lovely, so you're a very lucky man, let me put it that way. Now, Dawie, tonight we're going to be talking about the state of the economy in South Africa, and by all means it's not looking great. And I think the elephant in the room, and I think you'll agree with me, is Eskom.
No, I will not agree with you. I don't think it is Eskom. Eskom is just one of the symptoms of a much bigger problem. And the bigger problem, of course, is the ANC government. The ANC government is a destructive force, and it is because of the ANC government that we won't fix Eskom. It is because of the ANC government that the post office, as an example, is just sort of coming to an end. It's just dying. It's because of the ANC government that the local authorities is in the state in which it is. It is because of Eskom that Transnet is falling apart. So it's because of the ANC government. No, so it's not Eskom. But of course, yes, because if you don't have electricity, then you can't grow an economy. And I've made some calculations. We've got something weird in South Africa. We call it various stages of load shedding.
Yeah.
That means blackouts. So we've got stages 1 until, and apparently they're going to add some more stages. But stages 1 to 3, I've calculated that with stages 1 to 3 or stages 1 to 4, that the economy can't grow faster than, say, roughly about 1.5%. And nowadays, we're mostly in stages 4, 5, and 6. That means that economic growth is limited to about less than 1%. And they're talking about stages of even higher, going up to stages 8 or 9. I don't know what happens then. But my estimates for economic growth this year is around about 0. So we're not going to see the economy growing this year. But it's not Eskom's fault as such. It is the ANC government with the cadre deployment, with the mismanagement, with the corruption, with the incompetence, all of that put together is the resulted in Eskom just collapsing. And I can just tell you, I've looked at some data. In 1994, in South Africa, we generated on a per capita basis more electricity than the per capita electricity generation in the rest of the world.
Wow.
Today, South Africa's electricity generation is approximately 60% on a per capita basis compared to the rest of the world. So yeah, there you have it. That's the reason why the economy is not growing. Not necessarily because of Eskom, but because of an incompetent and quite often a corrupt government.
Yeah, well, if you're to believe Ramaphosa, the problems with Eskom are all related to apartheid. You know, it's
No.
quite. I know he's talking out of a place where the sun don't shine, but that's what he suggests. Now, you touched on something really interesting, Dawie. You know, I was thinking about this when I was preparing for our discussion, and the thought I have is: have you considered a predictive chart on a sliding scale of the rand versus dollar, depending on load shedding? In other words, as load shedding goes up, where you see the rand being valued against the dollar, because obviously the less power you have, the less the rand is going to be worth.
Yeah, no, there are two answers to that. And I've got some slides. You know, if you allow me to share my screen, I can see if I can
Absolutely.
open some of that. So while I'm talking to you, let me just give you, while I'm talking to you, I'm going to open a presentation that I've prepared recently. But there are two answers to that. Of course, if you don't have electricity, then what happens is that it's like anything else. If something becomes very scarce and something becomes very expensive, then you tend to use it better. And that's exactly what we are doing in South Africa. We are using electricity much, much better than previously. And I've done some calculations on how we improved our electricity, let's call it electricity productivity in South Africa. And let me see if I can get this specific slide. Here it is. So let me just share this with you, if I may. So how did we improve our electricity productivity in South Africa? And here's the slide. I hope that shows. Does it?
I've just got a grey screen.
All right, let me try again. See if I can get it again. I've done a calculation. There it is. Start sharing. You should be able to see it now. Not yet. Okay, but
It's just a grey screen. I'm sorry.
Okay, let me talk you through it.
Yeah, please do.
Basically, what it does is that I've calculated what the impact of. Okay, let me start again. In 2007, we used. Just bear with me for a moment. We used 100 units of electricity to produce 100 units of the economy.
Right.
Okay. And last year, if we used 100 units of electricity, that is Eskom electricity, today we will produce 135 units of the economy. So 35 units more than compared to 2007. So two things has happened here. The first one is that there was quite a dramatic improvement in electricity productivity. So if something becomes scarce and expensive, then you tend to use it better, and that's indeed what we are doing in South Africa. We're actually quite good at using the little electricity that we do have. That's the first point. The second point is we are also generating a lot of electricity in the private sector. And that's also about 10 or 15% or so.
Yes.
So basically what has happened since 2007 is that Eskom has lost a third of its market already. And that will continue. They will continue to lose market share.
Yeah.
And they will lose market share to the private sector because the private sector is generating some of their own electricity. Of course, not enough. And they will also lose market share because the private sector is simply using electricity much more efficient today. So that is certainly is a good news story in a way. So we're quite good. We don't have much electricity and therefore we use it quite well. Then your question about the exchange rate of the rand. The rand is currently trading at just over 18 rand to the US dollar. I've calculated that the rand should be at the moment, and if you ask me, I will tell you how I've done the calculations. But I've calculated that the rand should be trading at about 16 to the US dollar, actually less than 16 to the US dollar today. It is actually trading at much weaker than that. So the rand is much weaker than usual. And of course, there are reasons for that.
Yeah.
The reasons has to do with things like, for example, weak economic growth and political uncertainty and things like that. So the rand has already taken a knock, and the rand is already reflecting a significant political risk premium if somebody wants to invest in South Africa. That in itself is not necessarily a bad thing either, because our exporters are suddenly quite much more competitive because of the weaker currency. And also, if you have a weak currency and a very attractive capital market, it means that the foreigner can buy a weak currency. But that means he's buying a currency that he gets at a very, very good price. And he can use this very cheap currency that he's just bought to buy very attractive capital market instruments. And so yes, it is certainly not a good thing for us South Africans, because I'm on my way to go to the Netherlands as an example, and I'm paying a lot for euros, so that's not good for me. But it can be good for at least some sectors of the economy, especially the exporters. And I also believe, because of the weak currency and a very attractive capital market, that it is quite possible that we can see the rand drifting back. I don't think to 16, but drifting back to, say, less than 18 even to the US dollar. Or maybe even better than that. So I think the rand is a little bit overdone where it is. The rand, I must tell you, not only the forex market, but the capital market is really, really very clever. And the capital market especially tends to price all sort of developments in much quicker than, say, for example, the equity market. So I'm a great fan of the capital market. The capital market tells me all sort of things, and at the moment the capital market has weakened recently, and the capital market tells me that the foreigners and locals are demanding quite a significant risk premium before they invest in South Africa.
Right. Okay, look, I've got a few points I just want to pick up on there related to what you were saying. And when I was in South Africa in March, I was actually at the Walter Sisulu Botanical Gardens in Krugersdorp, and got to speak to a manager of a restaurant there. And we were talking about Eskom in particular and load shedding. And he made the point that pre-load shedding, his electricity bill or power bill was 6,000 to 8,000 rand per month. After load shedding, and we're talking back then, it was 2.5 hour lots for about twice in the morning, and I think there was one in the afternoon. His power bill, because he had to then depend on diesel, went up to 70,000 rand per month. So what we're talking about when we talk about these units and efficiency when it comes to electricity is the inefficient businesses that use more electricity are the ones that are most impacted and close. Wouldn't that have a bearing on that unit level? In other words, as businesses close because of their inefficient use of electricity, it's only the ones who use less electricity that are surviving.
Okay, let me give you my numbers. Until about 2 years ago, my electricity bill was about 8,000 rand per month, because I've got a big place here that everybody's using electricity and hair dryers, all sort of things. So that was my electricity bill monthly. Today, my electricity bill is roughly about 2,000 rand, and in a month's time, it's going to be zero.
Yeah, because you got solar.
And that's exactly the reason.
Yeah.
And that's what people are doing.
Yeah.
So people are trying to move away from Eskom, and they're doing it. I'm telling you, I'm an asset manager. I look after people's money. So I take people's money and I invest it in share portfolios, or I invest their money. So I look after their money. And I can tell you, quite a lot of my clients come to me and say, listen, they want some money back from their accounts because they're going to buy solar. And they're moving off the grid. And I'm moving off the grid as well. So yes, you're absolutely right. Some of those smaller companies, especially companies or businesses that cannot afford it, to make use of alternative or private electricity generation, of course, they get into trouble and they simply cannot survive. And many of them fall over. But many of them actually survive. And there's this industry that is suddenly exploding in South Africa, and that's a solar industry. They are so busy, these guys, putting up solar panels on the roofs and putting the solar geysers and all that sort of stuff, that actually that is adding to economic growth in a perverse kind of way. And the banks are quite happy to finance that as well. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the process of moving from state-provided electricity to private sector-provided electricity, that's quite a painful process. And in the process, many companies are simply won't be able to make it. And we actually do see that.
Yeah.
Many companies do go belly up.
Well, again, there are just a few points I want to pick up on. And the first one is that you are on the public record of saying that Eskom is going to die a slow death, just like South African Airways and other state-owned enterprises. I just want to put that on the record. And the other thing is that when we talk about the importance of the private sector, I read that the predictions are that by 2025, over half of electricity production in South Africa will be driven by the private sector. In other words, going away from Eskom. Which brings me to this point, which, I mean, I know the ANC have a huge problem when it comes to basic logic. And I see that at Frankfurt, Eskom won a court case stopping them using solar power to feed their local community. And now Eskom are threatening to do the same to the farming community in KwaZulu-Natal, saying you cannot use solar power to drive your irrigation, to drive all the things you need to do in farming, because we're going to challenge that. What are your thoughts about that? Because, I mean, Eskom's causing the trouble, and then it's stopping communities provide solutions. And I'm thinking also Orania. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, Scott, I'm not an expert in this, and I'm not a legal expert here, but I think there are a couple of other moving parts that we have to be aware of as well. One is that quite often Eskom's got a vested interest in keep on providing electricity to some of these customers because they've previously invested in capital. They've previously invested in generation stations or in electricity infrastructure and stuff like that. And I guess they could have a case in that the assumption was that these customers will keep on buying electricity from them. I know what you're going to say. As long as they can provide electricity, yes, they can't necessarily provide electricity. But just keep in mind there's probably more moving parts from a legal point of view than simply a case of Eskom just saying, listen, you're not allowed to generate your own electricity. I don't think that is the case. But more importantly is like what you've just said, and that is that I think Eskom is going to come to an end in any event. Eskom is slowly going to die. It's not slowly going to die. Not the whole of Eskom. The plans are to get Eskom broken up into three pieces: the generation part, the transmission part, and the distribution part. Right. Now the distribution, that's quite interesting actually to talk about these sort of things. The generation part is where they actually make or generate electricity. Now that can be privatized quite easily, and the private sector is quite active in that specific area of electricity, the whole electricity network, and they generate quite a lot of private sector electricity. I mean, like I do it myself. I've got solar panels on my roof. So, and I think that will eventually be privatized, not necessarily because of policy changes, simply because the ANC government is not capable of running a bath. So the private sector, and already the private sector is coming to the party, and the private sector is allowed today to really basically generate unlimited amounts of electricity. Previously, there was a limit on how much the private sector was allowed to generate in terms of generation of electricity. Then, of course, you've got the transmission part. Let's just skip that for a moment. And then you have the distribution part. Now, the distribution part is the last mile. And the last mile usually is occupied by the municipalities. So the municipalities will buy electricity from Eskom,
Right.
and then they will sell it on to me. And they will sell it on to me at quite a handsome profit margin. So they will make a lot of money, the municipalities, and they are very dependent on that specific source of revenue, the municipalities. Now, that is also something that can be privatized, but I can promise you the municipalities, they're going to put up a huge fight because that's a major source of revenue for the municipalities. But what has been happening the past couple of years is that the municipalities, many of them, stopped paying Eskom. So they owe Eskom a huge amount of money, in excess of 70 billion rand, as it is at the moment. And there are a number of court cases where the court said, listen, but the customers are paying for electricity. The municipalities are not paying the money over to Eskom, and therefore Eskom cannot cut off the power. That actually creates the opportunity for the private sector to buy electricity directly for Eskom, and that will have dire consequences for the local authorities. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as well. But the point is, I think the distribution part will be privatized to a large extent. It is, in fact, being privatized as we speak. Then the part in between, the transmission part. The transmission parts are these big pylons that carry electricity from wherever it's generated to wherever it's consumed or used eventually. Now, that is what economists call a natural monopoly. And I think that is the only part of Eskom that will remain. Because natural monopolies, because of the nature of natural monopolies, it doesn't make sense really to build a second electricity transmission network right next to the existing one and try to compete with that. It's like building a highway next to an existing highway and trying to compete with that. It doesn't make sense. So I think that will remain part, and I think that's the only part of Eskom that will really survive, the transmission part, which is also not a bad thing. As long as it's properly run, the transmission part can be the buyer of electricity and can be the seller of electricity. It can be, in a way, the wholesale market of electricity in South Africa, and I think that's where we're heading for. But the generation part, the power stations, as an example, I think they're going to close down and they will be replaced by private sector generation. And the transmission part, or rather the distribution part, the last mile, that will also be taken over by the private sector eventually.
Right. Well, look, I just want to come back to Frankfurt and what they're saying to the farmers in KwaZulu-Natal. You and I both travel a lot. And if you book into a hotel and you go to your room and you pull down the bed sheets and you see they're spoiled, the shit's going to hit the fan, proverbially, because, this is not what you've bought into. Now, if you've got your own set of clean sheets, then you put that on because you know that it's going to work. Now, what's happened with Eskom, when you consider the way they've totally screwed up the power system in South Africa, they have soiled the sheets. They're not providing what they promised to provide. So for communities like Frankfurt, for farmers in KwaZulu-Natal to come up with their own power solutions is actually a good, positive thing. And I cannot see any legal imperative as to why that should be prevented.
Yeah, I must tell you, I'm not so sure that specific case that you're referring to has been concluded. I think that case is still in process, and I'm not so sure Eskom has won it yet. And even if they've won the first round, the first legal round, I'm pretty sure there will be appeals, and I agree with you eventually. I think, the logic is simply that if you cannot provide electricity, I'm going to generate my own electricity and you can't stop me. So I'm pretty sure that Eskom, and as far as I know, that specific case has not been concluded yet.
Right. And I just want to tell, we've got close to 100 people watching us on YouTube and a lot more on Loving Life TV. And I just want to say to those who are not familiar, please go and register on lovinglifetv.com, because we only use YouTube as a marketing platform because they censor everything that we put up there, and we're not allowed to tell you the real news, so please do go to lovinglifetv.com to be kept informed. Now, getting back to private electricity generation, Dawie, I've been hearing that Eskom is now talking about charging, I think it's 3,200 Rand per month or something like that, to homeowners who are off the grid.
Yes.
To have the luxury of going off the grid and using the good old sun up there in the sky to actually generate electricity. That to me just sounds criminal.
Yeah, no. Let me just explain the way I understand it. Let me explain what I do at the moment. Not for long, but that's what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm still connected to the grid. I've got my own solar system, and I've got my own backup batteries and my own inverters and stuff like that. And I generate my own electricity, but sometimes there's bad weather for 2 or 3 days. And over those 2 or 3 days, I'm not capable of generating enough electricity. My panels simply don't get sun, and I can't charge my batteries. And during that time, what I will typically do, I will just tap into the existing grid and fill up my batteries. That's basically what I do.
That's if there's no load shedding.
Yes, that's if there is. But even if there is load shedding, I've set my system, and these systems are just absolutely amazing.
Wow.
Even if there is load shedding, I've set my system to, whenever the power comes on, to fill up my batteries to a certain percentage anyway.
Right.
So basically what I do, I generate my own electricity, and I use Eskom as a backup kind of way.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I get the best of all worlds. I generate my own electricity, and if I can't generate my own electricity for whatever reason, I can always fall back on Eskom. Now, Eskom knows this. And in fact, that puts an extra load on the network, because if they're during times of bad weather, as an example, or just after load shedding, quite interesting, just after load shedding, when electricity comes on, then everybody fills up their batteries, and you get this overload of the system.
Yeah.
So it creates all sort of weird incentives and distortions to the electricity, to the network. Now, Eskom's argument is, but you guys, you're simply using me when you need me, and you use me as a backup. But in the meantime, you generate your own electricity. So you don't really need me only during times of, distress, or during times of emergency, when there's not enough sun, as an example. And that's unfair. So for the right to be connected to the grid, I am going to charge you something. That's the argument of Eskom. And I must tell you, I don't think that's an unfair argument. So they're going to tell us, listen, in order to be if you want to use Eskom as a backup, you have to pay X amount of money monthly, simply because you are connected to the network. And if you use electricity, you have to pay on top of that as well. I think that is a valid argument.
Right.
And that's the reason, by the way, that is the reason why I've decided to go off grid completely. Yeah. So I'm going to switch off my electricity connection to Eskom completely. I'm putting up additional solar panels, and I'm going to be completely off the grid from now on, because I will be able to generate enough electricity, and I've bought a generator. So during those few days where I won't be able to generate enough electricity via my solar panels, I will simply fall back on my own generator, which will make life much easier for me, and it will also be cheaper. But Eskom's argument, as far as I'm concerned, is a valid argument. But I'm afraid if you push that price, that connection price, too high, then more people are going to do exactly what I'm doing. And in the end, Eskom is going to be the loser in this.
Well, it looks like it's shutting down anyway. But just touching very briefly on the batteries, you said you've got really good batteries. Now, I take it they're lithium batteries, are they?
Yes,
okay,
that's
true. People who buy into going off the grid, they've got to be really careful about the type of battery they buy. And if you buy a cheap battery, you're going to have a problem. Because my understanding is that with lithium batteries, if you go below 50% charge, then you've got a chance of damaging the battery. But with other batteries, it's a much higher percentage you have to maintain. Otherwise, your ability to store power can be dramatically reduced. Are you familiar with that situation?
I can tell you, I bring my batteries down to 10%, and they go up and down percentage-wise. They maintain their capacity as far as I can see. I'm not an expert on this, so you're asking the complete wrong person on this. But I can tell you from personal experience, my batteries go down to 10%, even as low as 10%. Once it goes down to 10%, then the system shuts down completely.
Okay, so it has a storage capacity maintained.
But again, I'm not the expert in this. You're asking the wrong person.
All right. Now, okay, before we move on to the central bank digital currencies and cryptocurrencies in that area, from an economist perspective, now you've said that it's not just Eskom, it's a government, and I totally agree with you. I mean, this ANC government has totally screwed South Africa. But how does South Africa pull itself out of this economic shit that it's in right now?
Well, let me tell you, today, this afternoon, I don't know what the time is where you are, but it's 20 past 8 in the evening here.
4:20 a.m. here. And it's cold.
All right, but today I participated in a well, it's a meeting by a political party.
Right.
And the political party asked me, the specific political party asked me to come and do a presentation on the economy and to make suggestions on how we can fix the South African economy.
Right.
They told me that they do not expect me necessarily to follow the line of that specific political party. So I had carte blanche. I could say whatever I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I can come with whatever suggestions and solutions that I think is fit to fixing the South African economy. And I really like that because they listened. They said, listen, this is an open floor. Come and say and tell us what's going on and tell us what you think can be done to fix the South African economy. So I've got I sort of drew up a list of things that I think should happen. And here is what I think, if you want to fix South Africa, here is what needs to happen. The first one is that you have to follow the normal golden rules in order to get your economy to grow. And there are three things that you need to do. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about South Africa or anywhere else in the world, there are three things that are important. The first one is you must protect private property rights.
Right.
The second one is you must allow for free trade.
Right.
The third one is you must have sound money. Those are the three important things. And this is non-negotiable. If you want a successful economy, protect private property rights, allow for free trade, and make sure that you have sound money. Now, we can talk about those things, and perhaps we should, but those are the three things. So that you need to do in any event. So, coming back to South Africa. So, if somebody else takes over South Africa, if another government, another political party gets elected in office next year and they kick out the ANC, what should they do to fix South Africa? Now, first of all, I must just tell you that's not going to happen. I am pretty sure the ANC is going to be part of the South African government for another 5 years at least, and maybe with a reduced majority, maybe with even less than 50%, but less than 50% will still put them in a position to form a coalition government with the smaller political parties. So the ANC will be in government still. Even with less than 50%, the ANC will still be in government. There are a number of smaller political parties, even medium-sized political parties that will get into bed with the ANC, and that means that we have at least in fact, more than 5 years of ANC government in South Africa. And as long as the ANC is in government, we're not going to fix this country. So let's just start. That's an important point to make. But let's say some sort of miracle happens and another political party takes over. What can and what should happen to fix the South African economy? Now, I told you about the three golden rules. You have to follow that in any event. But what else needs to happen? The first thing is that the confidence in the South African government has simply collapsed. People don't trust politicians anymore. Not only the ANC, people just don't trust any politicians anymore. That's why we don't go and vote. We don't vote because a politician is a politician is a politician. They're all the same. They promise you the sun and the moon and the stars, and when they get into office, they buy a fancy car and they forget about the electorate. That's what they always do. That's how people see politicians in South Africa. In fact, that's not the wrong perception. That's pretty much what politicians are, not only in South Africa but worldwide.
Including, may I say, the Minister of Electricity.
Yeah, perhaps he was well. All right, so what should happen? So we don't have confidence in government. So the first thing that we need to do, we have to somehow get people to start getting confidence, to trust government again. And I think there are short-term goals and longer-term goals that we should try to, that we should aim for. The shorter-term goals are try to get some confidence back and don't try to do something fancy. Do something small that you are sure that you will be successful in and something that people will support. And I can think of two easy things. That's not going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, everybody will support you in that, or most people will support you in that, and it will be obvious for everybody to see that you are successful in doing this. And one is to simply clean the place up. To say, listen, this place is a mess, it's dirty, we are going to clean the place up. We're going to pick up the litter and we're simply going to clean it up. Everybody's going to support you. Who doesn't want a clean place? So just start a campaign cleaning up the place. And you know, it has been done in countries. Like, for example, in Rwanda.
Yeah.
Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, he started a campaign whereby everybody in the country, once a week, they go out into the streets and they clean the place up. They are proud of having a clean country. Just have a clean country. People will see that, and it's a win. It's an easy win. So you have to, that's one example. Another one is just fix the traffic. The traffic in South Africa is a nightmare. I mean, people simply ignore the traffic rules. I went up to Komatipoort yesterday. You won't believe what I saw in terms of the traffic, what's happening with the traffic. So just fix the traffic. Get people to follow the traffic rules. If you drive too fast, if you cross a line that you're not supposed to do, if your vehicle is not roadworthy or anything, then find that person.
Yeah.
We've got it's not going to cost you anything more, and people will support that. And if you're successful in that, you will get the death toll down on our roads, and you will have a small win, which will be important. So it's something like that. So tackle something that's easier to get confidence back in government. So that must be your short-term goal. And then on slightly longer term, a couple of things that you need to do. One is that your medium-long-term goal must be to fix education in South Africa.
Right.
The education in South Africa is absolutely horrible. If you compare South Africa's education outcomes to all countries in the world, we quite often score at the bottom of the pile. Recently, there was the so-called Pearl studies, and the Pearl study, according to the Pearl study, South Africa's grade 4 learners are the worst in the world in terms of the reading capacity and the reading skills and things like that.
And mathematics.
And mathematics is in another scale. It's a so-called TIM study. I'm referring to the Pearl study. So, according to the Pearl study, our reading for our grade 4s is the worst in the world. They can't read for meaning. The worst in the world. Stone last.
Yeah.
So we have to start a process, and this is going to take a long time. It's going to take 20 years to fix education in South Africa. But we have to start, and we have to start where it matters, and it starts with primary education. And the emphasis must be on skills development and not on qualifications. So that is a long-term project that we need to start. A couple of other things.
Sorry, just before you go to the other things, Dawie, I just want your view on this. Something that's really topical at the moment is the Bella Bill, where they're looking at bringing in comprehensive sexual education into the curriculum in South Africa at an age of 5. Well, you've just said that they've got to fix up the education system. What they're doing is they're actually destroying it by bringing in things like that.
Yeah, I did say that we need to fix education. And yes, we need to fix education. Unfortunately, education, like anything else in South Africa, is quite often seen as an ideological tool in the hands of the governing party, in the hands of the ANC. So they use education, or they use the civil service, or they use BEE requirements, or they use electricity, they use everything to achieve certain political or social objectives that I think are the right objectives. And exactly the same as what you're referring to. But fortunately, we have a government that is so completely and totally hopeless, incompetent, and quite often corrupt that they can't do these sort of things. So I'm not concerned about this. It's exactly the same with the National Health Insurance. The National Health Insurance Bill has been passed by Parliament. So it's going to the House of the provinces, and then it will be signed by the President, and it will become law. But I'm not concerned about that because it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen because there isn't money and because they simply do not have the capacity to do that. And the same goes for education. But yes, having said that, education is a major issue in South Africa. Right. And I would fix education by getting the private sector to provide education and to get the private sector to get people to acquire the necessary skills, not qualifications, but the necessary skills, and to make sure that education is there for skills development and not for some sort of social or political objective or whatever. So that is something that we need to fix. Our education, our skills development system in South Africa is absolutely horrible. Right. Then something else we need to fix, we have to understand that the fiscal accounts in South Africa are completely and totally unsustainable. The fiscal accounts, with that I mean what the Minister of Finance is responsible for. The state's debt levels have become unsustainable. It's just going up at an alarming rate. The fiscal deficit is just going up. The efficiency of the state is just horrible. And it's not only central government, it's the local authorities as well. It's a state-owned enterprise. The whole thing that we call the fiscus, everything to do with the fiscus and the management of the fiscus and the finances, all of that is in a horrible state. We need to fix that. And inevitably that means that the state must do two things. They must spend less money, much less money. And secondly, they must spend money much, much better. And if you do that, it inevitably means that you will spend less money on people. And if you do that, people are going to get angry at you. And if you force people to become more productive and more efficient in a way that they spend my money, taxpayers' money, then they also tend to get quite angry at you. And that, for political reasons, is something that the ANC government is not going to do. But those are the kind of things that we need to do. And a couple of other things that I would like to happen as well. Like, for instance, I would like to see the inflation targets lowered. Not only the band lowered, I would like to see a point target as an example. We need to do something about labor legislation. Labor legislation in South Africa is toxic. It's creating a very uncompetitive macroeconomic environment in South Africa. I would like to get rid of foreign exchange regulations, as an example, and the list goes on and the list goes on. So those are some of the things that needs to happen. But I can promise you, these things are politically extremely, extremely difficult to do. And the ANC government is simply not going to do this. Yeah. Because a politician once said that we all know what needs to happen, but we don't know how to get re-elected once we've done what needs to happen. Yeah. And that's the dilemma in South Africa. Politicians know what needs to happen, but they're not prepared to do that because they know they're not going to get re-elected. Certainly not in the case of the ANC. So perhaps there's something to be said for a dictator.
Look, there are a couple of points I just want to pick up on. And the first one is, I was surprised with your solutions that you didn't mention what I think are the two key aspects for saving South Africa. And if you look at Singapore, under the first Prime Minister, Harry Lee Kuan Yew, the whole pillars of bringing Singapore out of the mire, it was as bad as South Africa back in the 1970s. Yeah. And it's now probably the best state in the world. And yes. the two pillars were meritocracy yes. and fighting corruption. And just yes. on those two pillars, they brought Singapore into the world-class state that it is today. Well, what about those two areas? I mean, yes, think of cadre, cadre deployment by the ANC. You've got someone like Bekesele as the Minister of Police. I mean, really? Where's the meritocracy?
No, of course. No, of course you're right. No, we have to professionalize our civil service. Unfortunately, the civil service in South Africa, you become a civil servant, not all of them. Let me just make that very clear.
Yeah.
There are many civil servants that are very, very much overworked and underpaid. And even policemen. There are many policemen that are not corrupt, without a doubt. And many teachers that are doing an excellent job. But unfortunately, the reality is that the majority of civil servants in South Africa are overpaid and underworked. And unfortunately, most of them belong to the trade union federation called COSATU, which is part of the tripartite alliance in the ANC government. So there's a political angle to the whole thing. So you're not going to get civil service excellence in South Africa as long as the political reality remains. And the political reality remains that they are part. You can't have Labour in government with government governing Labour. That's a contradiction. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And corruption in South Africa, in a way, has become endemic. And even if we vote for another political party, let's say the DA becomes the next political party with more than 50, with let's say 60% support in South Africa. Will they be able to get rid of corruption? They might be able to, but I can tell you it's going to take a very long time. You really have to lock up a lot of people for a very long time before you're going to turn this ship around. The ANC government has caused so much damage. They've damaged the fabric of South Africa's society. They've polluted our souls. It's going to be very difficult to turn this around, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah. Well, look, I just want to say on the Democratic Alliance, they've sold their souls to the World Economic Forum and the One World Government agenda. And
here we go again.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I can give you an example, Dawie. I can give you an example. Last year, Democratic Alliance were paid 80 million rand by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is Big Pharma, okay? And soon after they were paid that money, Alan Wind said that it was mandatory for children who are going into school in the Western Cape to have the jab. Now, you join the dots there. And I'm just gonna move away from that. Just let you think about that. About a month ago, I had a live stream with a fellow who's come up with an incredibly simple, inexpensive solution to getting rid of the shit in dams like Hartbeespoort. And apparently Hartbeespoort is about 30% just sewage at the bottom. It just goes, because it's heavy, it goes to the bottom. So your actual clean water that you got at Hartbeespoort Dam is only a small percentage of how full it looks when you're actually looking at the dam. And he's come up with a bio solution that works. It's actually now been used in some power stations to clean water biologically, as opposed to the chemical process that's been used in the past. And he can't get in through the front door with the Department of Sewage and Water. He can't even get through the front door because the people who are controlling, the current status quo are making sure that his technology goes nowhere. It's when you talk about cholera and Hammanskraal and it's crazy that they're not actually looking at this stuff.
Yeah, Scott. In the case of the Hartbeespoort Dam, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but the major reason why it is polluted is not because of sewage, but it is because of the runoff of agriculture.
Yes,
that's the main reason for that.
Yeah, but there is a huge sewage component in there, and he's actually measured it. Yeah,
it could be, but it's mostly because of nitrates coming from the farms upstream.
Yeah, and the water hyacinth covering the lake now or the dam is just shocking. Now let's move on. Dawie, central bank digital currency. A year ago, no one even knew about this, but all of a sudden, it's the big buzzword, and everyone's talking about it. And I know that you personally have been involved in projects which incorporate digital currency. Do you want to tell people what central bank digital currency is and what sort of digital currency you're working on, which is really the futuristic form of money?
Yeah, okay, let's just understand. I think what's important before we get to currency is just to ask the question, is there a system that that a system that we can trust, where we can trust information. Now, let me give you one example. Say, for example, I want to sell my house to you, then there are many questions. First of all, am I the owner of this house? And you are running a big risk now, because if you give me money and I'm not the owner of the house, then you're probably not going to become the new owner of the house.
Right.
So that's a problem. So that's a question that you need to ask. I also have a problem, because if I transfer the ownership of the house to you, then I don't know whether I'm going to get the money from you.
Right.
So there are two major problems on this. And in order to address that specific problem, what we do, I appoint a lawyer and you appoint a lawyer. And there are all sort of systems and checks and balancing and all sort of rules. And in the process, what happens is that my lawyer will get a guarantee from your lawyer that you are actually going to pay. And your lawyer will get a guarantee from my lawyer that I am actually the owner of this property. And we will get the authorities that, and eventually on the D-Day, what will happen is that the ownership of this property will move from me to you, and your money will move from you to me. So that's more or less how it works. It's quite an expensive process, because I have to pay for my lawyer, you have to pay for your lawyer, we have to pay all sort of transfer duties and all sort of stuff. But the reason why we've got a system like this is because we want to make sure that you eventually end up with the house and I eventually end up with the money. And you can understand, and even with the system like we have in the modern world, even with this sophisticated system, sometimes there are slip-ups. Is it possible to somehow do exactly the same, but be sure that that the ownership will move from me to you and that the money will move from you to me? So in other words, is it possible to cut out the lawyers and the authorities doing the transfer and all that sort of stuff? And the answer is yes, it is possible. And the technology for that is called the blockchain technology.
Right.
So the first thing that we have to understand, the blockchain technology, the proper implemented blockchain technology means that you can actually trust what happens on this blockchain technology. So the blockchain technology will make it much, much easier for me to transfer ownership from me to you. I simply send you a code and the property is transferred. And in fact, we can decide on a smart contract, and the smart contract will say on D-Day, ownership of the property will move to you and your money will move to me. Say, for example, without the use of lawyers and the authorities, whatever. And that's the magic of the blockchain. You can actually trust the information on the blockchain, because the information on the blockchain is true. And we can talk about this, why it is important, but just accept that for the moment. And because we're talking about currency now, not necessarily about the blockchain, but the importance of the blockchain technology is whatever the blockchain technology tells you is in fact the truth. Okay, so that's important. Now, let's move to currencies. Now, because of this technology, this is an excellent platform on which to launch currencies. So a currency, a piece of money, is got a similar kind of problem than the ownership of a house, for example. Now, when I have a note, I can give you the note and you can receive the note and you know this is actual money because you can feel it in your hands.
Yeah.
But nowadays money is more electronic. Mm-hmm. So there's a transfer of money from me to you, and usually what we use are banks. So I can't just send money to you and your bank account. If I want to send money to your bank account, I will give an instruction to my bank, and my bank will give an instruction to your bank, and your bank will then move information or then money into your bank account, and eventually you get your money. We think I transfer money from my bank account to your bank account. That's not what happens. In fact, there are a lot of things happening in between before the money ends up in your bank account. Unlike cash money, notes and coins, I can hand you R100 or $100 bill, and you will take it out of my hands and you will have it. It's in your possession. But if I transfer money from my bank account to your bank account, there are many intermediaries in between, including the central bank as well. But the blockchain technology makes that much easier. The blockchain and technology now allows me to transfer value from me to you instantaneously without the use of a intermediary of some source. And if we can somehow put money on the blockchain, that means that money on the blockchain becomes like cash. It is as if I am giving you $100 bill, as an example.
Yeah.
And that is why the blockchain technology is so absolutely amazing when it comes to money.
Now just on that point, Dawie, just on that point, that's the whole basis of Bitcoin,
Yes.
Ethereum,
Yes.
all these little old crypto coins. Yeah, back to you.
Okay, all right. The problem is when you go back to the technology, the idea of the blockchain technology is that it is decentralized, which means
Right.
nobody's in charge of that. And you belong to a club, and the club has got certain, well, they are sort of automatic stabilizing factors or stabilizing forces in this blockchain technology, making sure that the whole thing works well. It's decentralized and nobody is in charge of that. And that's the wonderful thing about blockchain technology. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, it is possible to create a blockchain technology that is actually under the control of somebody. And that is where central bank digital currencies come in.
Now that's
So
programmable.
Exactly, that's
Okay,
the point.
that's
So
where
a
the issue
central
is.
bank- Yeah,
Yeah.
a central bank can, for example, create a blockchain,
Right.
and a central bank blockchain is not a decentralized blockchain. It is actually a centralized blockchain under the control of somebody, and that somebody is the central bank.
Right.
Unlike blockchain is under nobody's control.
Yeah, it's
Or rather,
decentralized.
Bitcoin. Yeah, it is decentralized.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is under nobody's control. The same goes for Ethereum and many of the other ones. But in the case of the central bank digital currency, a central bank will create a blockchain which will be centralized and under the control of the central bank, which means it is programmable, as you've said, and which means that the central bank can make the rules.
Exactly. That's the problem.
And that's where the problem comes
Yeah.
in. Because what are those rules going to be?
Yeah, exactly.
Will the rules, for example, say that you can use my money, but you will not be able to buy brandy, for example? You can use my money, but I will limit the use of this money if you misbehave and say something bad about the governing party,
Exactly.
for example.
Yeah.
So and that is the real. I mean, this is Big Brother on
Yeah.
steroids.
Absolutely.
When a central bank or when an authority. Imagine when your money, whether it's dollars or rands or yen or whatever, when your money goes under such kind of control of under some sort of authority, they're obviously going to misuse this power. As things stand in the system that we have currently, in a way, they have a lot of control over us as it is. In any event,
Yeah.
Don't make a mistake about that.
Yeah.
But at least there are some loopholes here. I still can get access to cash, and I can still pay you with cash, and nobody can stop me. But if I have central bank digital currency, the central bank can stop me from paying you because you are a drug dealer, as an example, or because you are a criminal, or because you say something bad about government, or whatever the case may be. So the central bank, but in the case of cash, I can pay you and money can exchange hands without the interference of a central bank. But when you have central bank digital currencies, then I'm afraid they know of all transactions, and of course it is programmable, and whereby they can actually force us to do certain things or not do certain things. It can be used for good, just by the way. For example, if the government says, listen, we've got, in the case of South Africa, we've got 30 million people receiving a grant from the state every month. Quite often that money is used to buy lotto tickets, as an example. People simply waste the money, squander the money. So maybe they can write a rule and say, listen, if you get money from the state, if you get a grant from the state, you can't buy a lotto ticket, for example.
Right.
Maybe it's good, maybe it's not good, depending on your point of view. We can debate that point, but I guess there could be some good in a system like this, and this is just one example. Or they can say, if you receive a grant, you can only spend the grant on nappies and on formula milk, on stuff like that. For example, you can't spend it on brandy, as an example. For example, so I guess, and I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. Just please, I think people's got the right to buy whatever they want to. But I guess if you pay a child support grant, then the mother of that child certainly can't use this grant to go and buy brandy, for instance. Me as a taxpayer, I wouldn't be too happy if my tax money goes to somebody misusing the grant I pay to her to buy liquor, as an example. But it's a very powerful tool in the hands of whoever's in charge of the central bank digital currency, and this is Big Brother on steroids, without a doubt. The positive side of this is that I'm pretty sure. And by the way, this is not something futuristic. It already exists. But I think the silver lining here is that the private sector will come to the party, and the private sector will also create their own private sector digital currencies, and the private sector will be like a counterweight to the misuse of power by politicians or by the authorities. But you're right. This is something that we need to keep an eye on, and I'm actually quite excited about this, because this is going to lead to a dramatic change in the world of finance. It's already leading to a dramatic change in the world of finance. Banks, as we know it, are going to change, are going to disappear. There will be not banks, the traditional banks that we've become accustomed to. It will be replaced by something else. And that process is already happening. And I'm not too scared about that, because if you go through the history of money, the past 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, since money was first invented, money always changed form. And whenever money changed form and there was a new kind of money, a new use for money, that coincided with dramatic economic progress. So this is one of those examples. So of course there will be politicians that misuse it. There will be authorities that will misuse it and trying to enslave us because they've got the power over that. But I'm sure that we will make a plan, because we've been making plans for thousands of years, and in the end, things turn out quite well for us as well. So I'm not too concerned about this, but let's be sure that this is a very, very powerful tool in the hands of whoever's in charge of that.
Well, I just want to pick up on one point that you raised, and I think this is the elephant in the room. In China, they've already got a social credit system, which is basically the social credit system is actually watching what people do and actually cutting off their access to the money. Now, the reason I'm talking about the social credit system that they've been trialing in China is the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
Now, Rishi Sunak's father-in-law is a fellow by the name of Narendra Murthy. Now, you probably weren't aware of that, but Narendra Murthy is the guy who established Infosys. Infosys is a huge IT company, global IT company. It's a partner in the World Economic Forum, which we all know about, and Klaus Schwab, and I can see that smile coming over your face. But this is the serious side of it. They have a project listed with the World Economic Forum where they want to develop a global social credit system that will be linked to the central bank digital currency. This is the father-in-law of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Well, one thing is not going to happen, and that is that the countries in the world are not going to get together and create a global currency. That's just not going to happen, because politicians, they will always fight. And the politicians all want to be the top guy, and so that's we're not going to see a global currency. We will see a dominant currency like the US dollar, but we're not going to see a global currency. That is just not, and we are not going to see a global government either. Politicians will always fight amongst each other. We've seen this. There are so many examples. 100 years ago, the UK, the pound sterling was the most dominant currency in the world, and the pound sterling today is considered as an emerging currency, by the way. So we're not going to see a dominant currency in the world. But you're right. We will probably see a social credit kind of system, and they will try to implement that. The Chinese already have a social credit system, and if you misbehave, you can't buy a train ticket, as an example.
Yeah.
But that's nothing new. You have that as well. We have that in South Africa as well, because if you have a criminal record in South Africa, as an example, then you can't become a director of a company. What's the difference then?
Unless you're an ANC cadre.
Yeah, well, but that's a social credit system.
Yeah.
That's a social credit system that I'm not necessarily opposed to. If they say, I don't want a criminal to become a director of a company,
Yeah.
or a delinquent director to be allowed to become a director of a company. So we have a social credit system. What you are referring to is a social credit system that goes beyond what is reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
agree,
control.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. But a social credit system as such, we have that already, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily.
But this is.
Yeah.
But hang on,
I
Dawie.
understand.
This is a social credit system on steroids. I mean,
I understand that.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that. But where to draw the line?
All right. Let me ask you: Have you read Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset?
Not the whole thing, but I've read some of it. Yes.
Okay, because I mean, if you've read that book, you'll know that the World Economic Forum has said that by 2030. You will own nothing, but you will be happy. And that's one of their famous comments, yeah.
Yeah, but that's not that. Again, that's not necessarily a wrong. Depending on how you look at it. Say, for instance, our financial director, by the way, he doesn't own a car. He hasn't got a car because he only uses Uber. So he doesn't own a car, and he's happy.
I bet he's got a big bank balance.
Yeah, of course. He's
well, Klaus Schwab is saying you will own nothing.
Yeah, I doubt that. I think that is one of the requirements of a good economic system, and that is the protection of private property rights. I think private property rights are absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
I think we are animals that crave to own something. We want to own stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why we compete all the time. That's why politicians compete all the time. So perhaps that's a good thing, because that's a good thing to always compete and to always to fight, because it makes sure that we don't all get forced into one political system where there's only one top dog. So there will always be conflict, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because it makes sure it's a continuous process where somebody doesn't dominate the rest of the world.
Dawie, we have two different perspectives in this one particular area, and I think it's really interesting, because when I first spoke to you, it was over a year ago, about one world government and stuff like that, and I could see your eyes turning to the heavens and this sort of smirk on your face. Now, back then, I think on a meter, you would have said there's zero chance of that ever happening. But when you look at what's happening in the world today, surely that little gauge on the meter in your head must be slowly moving up into maybe there's a 10% chance or a 5% chance.
No. In fact, there's less of a chance today. Do you think Xi Jinping and Joe Biden will form a world government? Do you think Joe Biden and Putin will form a world government, or Zelensky will form a world government?
Oh, Zelensky's I don't know where Zelensky comes into it, but anyway.
No, they're not the form a world government.
Okay, well, we'll keep revisiting this in years to come. Now, there's one other area that we haven't talked about, which is pivotal to the central bank digital currency, and that is artificial intelligence. You've heard of ChatGPT and this whole...
I've used it, yeah. I've used it.
Now, I actually put in there a poem for Scott Bolson, and within seconds it came up with a 16-line poem, which kind of summed me up perfectly, and that freaked me out. It really did. But this whole area of artificial intelligence, Elon Musk has said could be the greatest threat to the world as we know it and to democracy. because it is so powerful. What are your thoughts about artificial intelligence?
I don't want to debate Elon Musk because he's, without a doubt, far more intelligent than me. And I mean, he's achieved far more than what I've ever will be able to achieve. And there are many very clever people also pointing out exactly the same things that he's pointing out, that this is a very dangerous technology. But I've got two issues. I've got two arguments against that. The one is that you won't be able to stop it. So it doesn't matter what sort of legislation you put in place or what rules you put in place. This is technology that you can't stop. You can't stop it. Let's just understand this and understand this very well. Is that the genie is out of the bottle.
Right.
So there's no way that you're going to stop this. The second thing is, and again, I fall back on the little bit that I know about history. If you go back in history, we've had a number of major technological breakthroughs, and in many cases, people were very scared of these new technological breakthroughs. People were worried about it because it's going to take away my livelihood. It's gonna take away my job. It's gonna be bad for me for whatever reason. And people burn down factories, and people sabotage new technologies, and they try to stop the trains because it's bad. It's gonna burn everything down, and that really happened. People don't like new technology because new technology always goes with disruption. And there's disruption and uncertainty, and people don't like that. But every time when we've had new technology, the result of that in the end was always for a better world. The world was always better after new technology. And it's not going to take away our job. Of course, it's going to take away a lot of jobs, but it will create far more jobs. So I will fall back on history and see what's been happening in history. And what's been happening in history is that these sort of things, this is nothing new. It's just a new technology, and there's going to be even newer and even better technologies in future. And in the end, we as humans going to be better off. I'm not scared of it.
Well, I just want to tell you, they actually did I don't know how they did it, but they did like a little test case with artificial intelligence. And that artificial intelligence was given a task to destroy some enemy. And what the artificial intelligence had to do first was actually get permission from the person who was actually behind the computer. And this artificial intelligence had powers to, within the project or the program they're doing, to take out anything. And if it took out the enemy, it earned points, and its target was to achieve a certain point level. So it was all just a hypothetical thing. But what the artificial intelligence did when the controller said, no, you cannot take out that target, is it actually tried to destroy the controller because it was stopping it earn points. And this is something that it's something you can't control once it actually takes over. But I want to move on from there because this is a huge subject. I want to talk about one final thing tonight, and I sent you an article about smart cities, and of course the Internet of Things. Did you have a chance to quickly go through that?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts about what you read in that article?
I think this is absolutely amazing. Okay, let's just understand what is happening here as an economist. What is happening? First of all, the world is urbanizing. We are all moving to cities. We are moving away from farms. Very small fraction of people today live on farms, and a smaller fraction live on farms in the rural areas. And a small part of the economy is actually generated out of cities. Most of total economic activities happen today in cities, and in the case of South Africa, more than 50% of people living in cities today. Apart from that, if you want to develop something, if you want to build a road, it make much more sense to build a road in a city, because if you build a road in a city, thousands of people are going to use it, but if you build the same road in a rural area, perhaps 10 or 20 people are going to use it. So it's much more cost effective to build infrastructure in a city. Apart from that, a lot of people live in a city, then they are they are in contact with other productive and other clever people as well. Unlike in the rural areas, when you're in the rural areas, people live far apart and it's very difficult to make contact with other people. So cities are a good thing. And we are moving to cities. It makes sense. It's cost effective. And that is what we want to do. And we want to do that because we can see people are moving to cities. So that's something we want to do. So I think the future of the world will be cities. Most people are going to live in cities. And more of the rest of this planet Earth will eventually move back to where it was 100 to 200 years ago. In fact, you can see even in places like South Africa, where the protected areas are expanding and more pieces of land and is actually dedicated to the protection of scarce of the species or nature or whatever the case might be. And we are becoming more and more productive on the land that we actually utilize for agriculture and stuff like that. So cities is the future. And that's what the only question is, how are we going to manage this? And I think this is where you're going to say a lot of things. Cities, we all move into cities, we will be monitored. The politicians are going to find out exactly what you do. It will be Big Brother all over again. But that's nothing different from what we have already. So I think continue with moving into cities, continue with urbanization, continue to develop things that will be good for mankind, and that probably means continue to build on cities and the technology that goes with that as well. Of course, there will always be danger. There will always be a crazy politician that want to control us. That's the case whether we live in cities or not.
Right. Now look, I'm going to just wrap this up with one final question for you, Dawie, and that is that Ramaphosa is talking about building a smart city in South Africa, which is basically, the fourth industrial revolution, Internet of Things and all this sort of stuff. Do you think that South Africa's saving grace will be that the ANC government is so incompetent, and as you correctly said, they couldn't even fill a bath? I mean, their chances of building a smart city are pretty well 0%.
No, they can't run an air. They can't run electricity utility. They can't run sewage works. They can't. They can't. There's no way they can build a smart city. No, no, not the ANC government.
Right. Dawie, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've covered some new ground, and I do feel, I'm just sort of saying this, I do feel that you're starting to come over to my way of thinking, that there is possibly some nefarious stuff happening at a global level. And I see the big smile on your face, but anyway, yeah, back to you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. It's always very nice talking to you. And I must tell you, I've got this feeling that you are slowly moving over to my side.
Dawie, have a great evening, and congratulations once again on your anniversary, even though you said it's 19,200 years or something like that.
Thank you, Scott.
Have a great evening, mate. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, guys, that was Dawie Roodt, and we were talking about a number of things. And I think the most important thing that we talked about there was, of course, Eskom and what's going on in South Africa. And I do apologize if I'm going off the screen. It's just because I'm looking for something, because we're going to go out with one of our theme songs, which in this case will be Op Ons Rots. Have a great evening, everybody, and don't forget, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time, we will be having another live stream. And for those people who aren't aware, we don't use YouTube, we just use it as a marketing tool. Our platform is lovinglifetv.com, and there we put up videos every day. We have the most comprehensive platform, independent website, uncensored, keyword uncensored, where we put up a huge amount of information with a South African focus. And we have a fantastic forum on there as well. And Nat Quinn looks after that and does an excellent job. All right, guys, I'm going to go out with Op Ons Rots. Have a great evening. Bye for now.
loop hand aan hand op goue warm sand. So baie wat ek wil hee, so baie dit brand. Ek staan op my rots, met golwe wat bots. Ons het geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer. Die winde waai sterk, dis kragte wat werk. Die gevoel in my hart, dis vrees wat wil brand. Ons is boere met trots, met my hand teen my bors. Ons ken geen vrees, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer. Ons sien wat gebeur, die leer sal ons nie steen. Kom slaan nog 'n keer, ek is stil, want ek weet hy is in beheer. Ons sien al die planne van goddeloze mannen. Ons weet hulle gaan nie wen nie, dis geskryf soos 'n duif. Ons sal wen, aanhou glo, want hy is in beheer.